They call it a tomb world, but that word is mercy. A tomb implies closure, death-marked and buried. But what lies beneath the crust of Ankros, the seventh, is not dead, nor buried, nor forgotten. It dreams in metal. It waits behind sealed gates older than the Imperium. It listens through dust-thick silence that predates the first colonists who dared call this world their own. And when the ground finally stirred, it did not groan or quake, it sighed, as if exhaling memories older than flesh. Those who remained on the surface would not die immediately. That would be too clean. Instead, they would learn what it meant to live inside memory, to suffocate not from airless lungs, but from presence, from something watching, something remembering, something built not of stone or steel, but of intention. Here, inside this world, death is not the end. It is architecture, the footage, the testimonies, the fragments they were never supposed to leave orbit, but some survived. Whispers carried across, data slates smuggled out, picked captures corrupted and enhanced, Vox recordings laced with static but undeniable in their message. If you're watching this, you've already seen too much, and yet you need to know more. Like, share, subscribe, but not for us. For them, for those still dreaming beneath. They were not the first to descend, only the first to return. The survey team from the Ankros 7 Tertiary Extraction Division was dispatched to investigate what the Auspex had marked as a substratum mineral distortion, possibly a new promethium pocket, or perhaps a rare metallic anomaly worth Mechanicus escalation. The colony's overseer signed the descent order at 4 o'clock standard, though by the time the team reported back, that signature had vanished from record. The file existed. The data slate was intact, but the inked imprint of his authority, the sigil, the timestamp, was gone, leaving only blank approval. 6 men and 1 servitor entered the breach. The breach itself had not been there the day prior. It yawned behind drill site Theta's perimeter scaffolding, between reinforced strata where no instability had been detected. No tremor, no collapse, just an opening. As if the mountain had remembered a mouth, they dropped fast. Initial descents are always fast. Standard protocol dictates short controlled abseil, minimum oxygen expenditure, pre-vox sweep for rad levels, and trace warp contamination. But the further they went, the more the cavern bent. Not curved. Bent, as though the angles refused to maintain fixed ratios. One moment a wall would seem 10 meters off. The next, the same stretch appeared within reach, reflecting Vox lamp light in dull, mirrored swells. Not glossy, not glass, just wrong. Team lead, Engan Seer, Malvo Thane, paused first. His mechadendrites twitched as though responding to invisible static. He ordered a stop. They took samples. The rock was not rock. It scraped into glinting powder, then reformed minutes later to the same seamless plane. The servitor ID 443B attempted a percussive sample, striking with force calibrated to shatter obsidian. The wall absorbed it. Not cushioned, not repelled, absorbed. No impact echo, no vibration, just disappearance. That was when the time distortion began. First to notice was Auxilia Tyan. He commented, lightly, that their chronos were out of sync. His read 518, Engine Seer, Thane's read 507. Voxtech Vens displayed 6.41. They assumed data corruption until Tiarn repeated himself. The same words, same tone, same breath pattern. 14 minutes after first saying them. Chronos are drifting. You see that? Same cadence, same micro, identical inflection. They froze. It wasn't a hallucination. The servitor caught it to its data log, confirmed the repeat, and tagged it as a loop. One it didn't recognize, but one it had registered. As they moved deeper, distances became unreliable. The Vox map showed them circling back, though they never turned. The path ahead became a helix, a coil unwinding into descent. One corridor seemed to stretch for 200 meters, yet they crossed it in 30 seconds. Another, barely visible between two columns, led them upward for what felt like hours, only to return them to the chamber where they began except. Now the chamber had statues. There were no statues before. Now there were 7. All were featureless, blank stone, but each stood exactly the same height as a team member, and each, when approached, changed its surface texture, becoming briefly granular, almost as if recognizing flesh, then smoothing into polished darkness again. One statue bore a shoulder plate. Voxdeck Ven wore the same. He removed his, stared at the statues. The team blinked. The statue no longer had one. Ven's shoulder was bleeding. No wound, just blood. The Vox feed stuttered. They heard footsteps. Not echo, not replay. Actual footsteps. Multiple, soft, deliberate, but none belonged to the team. Then the names began to go. Not forgotten, erased. Auxilia. Tiarn tried to check his ident tag. It was blank. Engenser. Thane pulled his own data slate. His access code failed. Denial, not due to error, but non-recognition. His retinal ID still unlocked his helm's systems, but it responded to him not as Thane, but as unknown senior functionary. They tried to speak names aloud. Only static came from their lips. No sound, no syllables. Just a low, humming distortion. Not painful, not even unnatural, just empty. They pressed on. Something compelled them forward. Not fear, not orders. Curiosity, perhaps. Though that too felt shaped like the cavern itself had sculpted their interest. They reached a chamber that defied description. Size did not apply. Scale was unmeasurable. The walls extended beyond Vox light range, but pressed close enough to iron, ozone, and something faintly organic. In the center was a pit. Not dug, not carved, just there. It pulsed. Not with light, with memory. Each of them saw something different inside. Ven dropped to his knees, weeping. Claimed he saw his mother's voice. Not face, not words. Voice, as color, as shape. Enginseer Thane stared into it, and muttered a sequence of Mechanicus litanies, long purged from the current catechisms. He couldn't recall where he'd learned them. The servitor approached. Its optic flickered, then failed. It stepped into the pit without command. It did not fall. It unmade itself. Metal unfolded, wires untwisted. Flesh peeled in silence. No scream, just deconstruction. Then the pit sealed itself. The walls receded. The chamber collapsed inward, without sound. The team found themselves at the cave mouth again. No memory of ascent. One by one, they emerged. Silent. Breathing changed. The overseer's record remained blank. The colony log listed no descent. Only the data slates confirmed it had happened. They were wiped shortly after. Except for one Voxdeck. Then left his slate inside the servitor's compartment, before the descent. When it was retrieved days later, during a routine sweep, it played only one recording. Geometry is not passive. It watches. It arranges. And below that, one final line of text, burned into the slate's interface. Do not name the walls. They name you first. The Medicaid logs listed them as stable. Vitals normal. No sign of exposure, no trace contaminants in blood, saliva, or breath, and yet none of the 7 who emerged from the cavern beneath drill site Theta were the same men who entered. Not according to anyone who knew them, not even according to themselves. They answered to their names, responded to orders, retained memory of standard protocol. But when the routine psychovals were conducted, a pattern emerged, not of insanity, not even of confusion, just rearrangement. Vox Tech. Ven knew the catechisms of the Vox discipline, could recite them backwards. But now, he emphasized syllables no one else had ever heard. Signal is sanctuary. Static is sacrifice. A phrase no data slate, no Mechanicus text, No archived protocol could confirm. Yet, he insisted it had always been standard. Angenseer Thane, for his part, began logging system reports in a dialect not currently used anywhere in known Imperium space. When confronted, he stared blankly and asked if the words had stopped being true. Then there was the breath. They exhaled frost. Not in cold, not in zero-watma conditions. In sealed Medicaid chambers calibrated at standard Imperial temperature, they breathed, and vapor coiled from their mouths, freezing glass, blooming rime across sterile steel. When Auspex was brought close, the frost retreated like mist drawing inward from heat, but the temperature never dropped. Instruments detected no cold zone, no environmental anomaly, just breath that refused to obey physics. And still, the men remained calm. Only one truly reacted. Tian collapsed during a debriefing. No seizure, no trauma. He simply folded forward, as if in prayer, then began whispering numbers first, in sequence, then backward, then into symbols unknown to the cogitator trying to transcribe. The symbols weren't drawn, they were expressed. The Voxlog transcribed them as tones, but when parsed, they formed shapes in the spectrograph edges and arcs, perfect and recurring. Not language, not code. Geometry. The Medicaid declared him comatose. But he continued whispering. More troubling was what came next. Walls began to breathe. The Auspex systems embedded across Ankros, the 7th subterranean facilities. Pressure, structural integrity. Monitors began registering rhythmic expansions. Pulses every 46 seconds. Not seismic, not gas, not atmospheric. The pattern was unmistakable. Inhale. Pause. Hold. Pause. No exhale. It was not airflow. The readings suggested mass displacement, millions of tons, shifting fractionally, as if the very substrata were flexing inward to allow something room to exist. The Mechanicus dismissed it as error. They recalibrated, replaced components, even purged machine spirits deemed resistant. But the rhythm remained. When resensed to the medical logs, the pulses aligned perfectly with the survivor's neural spikes. Every 46 seconds, a cluster of minor neural flares. No pain, no stress markers, just awareness. Not fear. Recognition. At night, the survivors did not sleep. They entered something like rest. Not REM, not stasis. Something else. Dreams were recorded through psycher-assisted Medicaid probes. All 7 dreamt the same structure. A room without entrance. Walls made of breath, and in the center, always the same phrase. Chiseled in ice across a perfectly flat floor. You do not leave by WLKNGA. Attempts to sedate them failed. The sedatives dissolved faster than normal, burned through bloodstream like heat through ice. When the doses were increased, their hearts adapted, slowed, matched the rhythm of the Auspex pulses. 46 seconds, the same across every survivor. By the 4th day, each began speaking to someone who wasn't there. Not hallucinations, not ghosts. The logs show full vocal clarity, coherent language, except they weren't speaking High Gothic. They weren't speaking at all. The sound was there, but no mouths moved. Spectrographs recorded their speech as modulated reverberation within nearby walls. Voxcasters echoed with responses, but no Vox units were transmitting. The walls themselves spoke, not audibly, but vibrationally. The conversations were mundane. How long has it been? It is not measured. Do we return? You are inside the return. This wasn't language. It was architectural interaction. On the 5th night, Voxtech Ven vanished. His bunk remained sealed. No exit, no breach. Just his bedding, his gear, and frost across the walls that would not melt even under direct flame. The Auspex recorded a shift at 2:41, a brief flicker. The breathing paused, then resumed, faster, 41 seconds. Something had taken a step. The survivors, now 6, did not grieve. They stood that morning with perfect synchronization, each facing different corners of the Medicaid ward. They inhaled together, exhaled frost that formed brief, angular glyphs on the glass. The glyphs faded within seconds. No two were the same, but when overlaid, they formed a perfect cube. Inside the cube, coordinates, not spatial, temporal, 41 hours from that moment, the Inquisition was notified. A kill team was mobilized. Standard cleansing, purge of anomaly, containment of data leak. The ship carrying them was rerouted before reaching orbit. No override, no explanation. The Vox transcript received by their navigator was clear. Do not interfere. They have already left. All 6 survivors remained in the Medicaid bay until they didn't. At exactly the appointed times, Auspex logged 0 heat signatures, 0 mass presence. Surveillance played in loop for 3 hours before noticing the feed was not frozen. Time was still passing, but the space had stalled inside the room. Silence. And in that silence, the walls stopped breathing, just once. The last recorded entry on the central Auspex console, time-stamped 1 second before the final pulse, was a single line of text. No origin, no process, just presence. They inhaled for you. Now you remember how to exist. When the grid failed across Encros 7, no one panicked at first. The colony had endured outages before, power fluctuations in marginal districts, brief failures from overdrawn circuits, even full shutdowns during tectonic recalibrations. What made this different was the sequence. The blackout began from the core outward, not the outer habs, not the periphery. It started with the Administratum Tower, then the Mechanicus command spine, then the main data. Whole sectors went offline without cascade or overload. No surge, no flicker, just absence. Within 4 minutes, 70% of the colony was submerged in perfect dark. Not dim, not brownout, black dot except for Hab Block 9, it remained lit. Every lumen globe burned steady. Every cogitator hummed, wall plates pulsed with internal warmth. Elevators still moved between floors. When the central grid was queried for an explanation, it refused to recognize Hab Block 9's existence. As far as the network was concerned, the building was offline. It had no power draw, no activity, no inhabitants. But it gleamed like a lighthouse in the sea of blackened concrete. Response teams were dispatched immediately. The tech priest assigned to lead the recon magos, Veril, insisted on a full machine spirit blessing before entry. When he placed his hand upon the block Isse Exterior panel, his augmetic fingers twitched. He withdrew them. They were wet. The wall exhaled. Veril said nothing, just ordered the doors opened. Inside, every apartment was in perfect order. Tables set, food plated, steam still curling from untouched dishes. Showers ran in some units. Holoscreens played low-volume infomercials. Lights bright, curtains drawn back. Life undisturbed, but no people, no bodies, no signs of struggle, no disarray, just absence. One responder, a junior enforcer named Kellen, walked into a child's room and reported hearing laughter. Not once, not an echo. Repeatedly. Consistent, gleeful laughter. He followed it to a corner closet and opened the door. Only darkness and a mirror, not mounted. Freestanding oval, frame made of a dull gray metal, not native to Ancrus 7. He blinked. The mirror blinked back. Not his own eyes. He stepped away. Later, he was found standing in the building's communal garden, hands clasped behind his back, eyes wide and unblinking, murmuring the word home over and over. He did not remember entering the room. Surveillance footage recovered from internal circuits, ones that should not have been active, showed the responders moving through the building. Each was followed by a faint secondary outline, a reflection, 4 seconds behind. At 3 o'clock, All footage cut to static, not corruption, not interference, static, like an unoccupied channel. The Magos performed an emergency rites pulse to assert data sovereignty. The feedback from the building's system was not resistance. It was grief. He later described it in his report. Not malfunction, not possession. The building did not deny us. It missed them. The central kitchens had food still cooking. Bread not yet burned. Soup not yet congealed. Flame that flickered in stasis. Refrigerators that preserved without draw, as if time was holding its breath. Each unit contained a datapad, not activated, not plugged. All displayed the same final entry. A message, untraceable. No sender, no protocol. Just a single phrase. We left, but we left ourselves behind. When the team tried to shut down power manually, the systems refused command overrides. But not with rejection. There was no security denial, no firewall alert, just a simple reply, occupied. The building's power grid remained sealed, its schematics unreadable, not corrupted, blank. Any attempt to remap returned recursive diagrams, floor plans of the surveyor's own minds. One enforcer scan showed a blueprint shaped exactly like his childhood home, down to the broken railing on the third step. Another diagram mapped nothing but doors. Doors leading only to rooms labeled memory. They found no remains. No hair, no cloth, not even fingerprints. As if the people hadn't just vanished, but had never weighed anything, except for the echoes. Voices lingered, not in rooms, in thresholds. When one stepped across a doorway, you could hear them cooking, arguing, singing, crying. Clear as vox, but only for a heartbeat. If you turned back, they were gone. Virel tried to commune directly with the machine spirit of the building. He entered the sublevel cogitator vault, alone, and activated a direct neural link. He remained inside for 3 minutes. He emerged weeping from every bionic eye. Not oil, not lubricant, tears. He did not speak for 12 hours. When he finally did, he said, "It doesn't know where they went, only that they were taken gently." When asked who took them, he answered, "Not taken," translated. The administratum demanded clearance of the block. Orders were issued for a complete shutdown. A skittery fire team was sent to sever the lines. They did not return an hour later. All lights in Hablock 9 extinguished simultaneously. No flare, no flicker, just blackout. And the rest of the colony's grid came back online. Power returned. Systems normalized. All logs of the anomaly were sealed under inquisitorial vault code. Access classified under threat vector Ronel. Magos Virel resigned 2 days later, citing ontological instability. He left behind only a single line in his final report. "They are not missing. They are still at the table. We are what left." The first pulse came at 0447 local cycle. No origin, no authorization, no encryption. A pure bandwave frequency that should have triggered nothing but white noise. Instead, it spoke, not sound, not tone, speech. It used the language of Ankros 7, not Gothic, not Proto-Terran dialect, but the local tongue, a crude, utilitarian fusion of laborer slang, machine cant, and colonial field speak. Yet the colony's founding lexicon was only 12 decades old. This signal spoke it with a fluency impossible even for natives. Not mimicry, not artificial. Native. It spoke like it had taught them. The signal had no point of origin. Deep scan Auspex Mechanicus triangulation arrays, and even the orbital astropaths all returned the same impossible answer. Beneath, not just underground, beneath space, beneath structure, beneath memory. Every scan looped downward until the mapping system generated a recursion collapse and refused further processing. Magos Lexan Shara was assigned the decoding protocol, adept in neuroeco-linguistics and hybrid code liturgical systems. She had unwrapped heretical tongues before, and rendered demon code into sterile cipher. This was different. She didn't decode the signal. She understood it. Before translation protocols initiated, she responded instinctively. The first log shows her speaking aloud, eyes open, breath shallow. No initiation rites, no prep. She simply said, "I am listening now," then collapsed. Her body functioned. No trauma. Neurospike detected, but not pathological. She slept, but she spoke in sleep, not babble. Sermon.tech priests recorded her words. At first, the speech resembled corrupted Benarica staccato rhythm of sounds punctuated with glottal stops and harmonic hisses, but the lexthaumaturges identified phonemes consistent with early colonial dialect, and then with older forms, and older still. Within 48 hours, her dreams formed a coherent pattern, a litany structured in verses. Each segment ended with a refrain. This was always ours. You borrowed light. Her speech could not be interrupted. Sedatives failed. Restraint triggered seizures. But each time her body collapsed, it resumed the exact sentence from the moment of interruption. Word for word. The administratum panicked. Some demanded youth, others warned of sorcery. One inquisitorial scribe from a passing fleet accused her of harboring xen, but the Magos biologists insisted there was no deviation. Shara's blood was clean, her soul not bright, but anchored. No warp residue, no psychic emission. She was dreaming the signal, and the signal responded. By the seventh day, it no longer came in pulses. It was continuous, a steady presence within Vox channels, a hum underneath every other sound. If you paused long enough, let silence settle there. It was not loud, not demanding, just present. A whisper in architecture. The Vox units in the manufactorum began to resonate even when powered down. Entire cogitator banks rebooted and displayed lines of text never typed, not random. Phrases from Shara's dreams. The breath before you spoke was given. Your iron bones are echoes. The city beneath still waits for its voice. The Mechanicus assigned a scribe engine to log her speech. Within 3 days, it had filled 12 data. The words looped. Yes, but they evolved. Patterns formed. Verses shifted. New litanies emerged, cross-referencing earlier ones, correcting, clarifying, a sacred text. Self-revising. The cult Mechanicus, initially skeptical, began holding quiet gatherings, not worship, observation. They sat in silence while her voice filled the air through Vox repeater. Some claimed to hear more than words. Shapes, memories, blueprints. One, tech adept, sketched an entire circuit pattern during a recitation. The design was functional in energy matrix unknown to current Mechanicus schema. It pulsed in rhythm with Shara's breath. When tested, it generated energy from no source, no plasma, no fusion, no draw dot, just presence. Then the dreaming changed. Shara began naming names, not people, not saints, places, cities never built, monuments never mapped, chambers of brass and obsidian, tunnels of moving angles, structures described not by height or width, but by feeling. A corridor as tall as grief, a dome wide enough to remember all failure. These locations were not metaphor when overlaid on the colony's geology. The descriptions matched mineral anomaly zones where survey data always failed. No team had entered. Now teams refused. The Vox signal began to bleed into other systems, not just Mechanica's gear. Vox beads in civilian hands caught fragments. Nursery intercoms played broken sentences. Personal aspects blinked out one word repeatedly, welcome. Fear rose, but faded quickly, not because danger passed, but because something deeper settled. Recognition. People began speaking to the signal. Not publicly, not in groups, alone, at night, in storage bays, between waking and sleep. A single miner claimed he could hear it in the shower, humming through the pipes. He carved symbols into the wall tiles, trying to mirror the sound. They matched patterns in Shara's dreams 3 days later. The Inquisition issued a planetary quarantine. No traffic, no exit, no explanation. They sent no representatives. By then, Magos Shara had stopped breathing, but she wasn't dead. Her vitals flatlined. No pulse, no blood, but brain activity remained stronger than ever, and she kept speaking. Her body began to change. Hair fell out. Skin turned translucent in parts. Veins disappeared. Her blood became clear, and she smiled. Not often, just once. During one recitation, her lips curled slightly. She whispered, "They never left. They only waited for a language to return." And somewhere, beneath the crust of Ankros 7, something pulsed in reply without source, without form, but not without meaning. They were uncovered beneath the collapsed refinery, near the lower crust fault lines where even seismic probes refused to operate. The cave-in hadn't been natural. The ground hadn't buckled or split, it had peeled, folding back with surgical precision, revealing a subterranean vestibule. No surveyor remembered charting, but the structure wasn't what drew attention. It was what stood within. Statues, dozens at first count, all humanoid, all standing at exact intervals along the chamber's radial edge, each perfectly equidistant from a central hollow disk. Not a dais, not a plinth, a whole, seamless, edge-polished, empty. The statues stood in stillness, but not silence. No sound came from them, but Uzbek's readings fluctuated near their surfaces, whispers encoded in vibration, patterns that resembled low-tier hymnal data, similar to those used in machine spirit pacification rituals. The Mechanicus couldn't translate them, but the frequency was comforting, until the first one moved. Not limbs, not stance, just face. Habdrilla Rovint, assigned to mineral tagging, stared at the closest figure for 42 seconds. He dropped his Auspex unit and screamed. Not a startled cry. Recoil, hands to face. Collapse, he babbled. Names, one, in particular, Jana, his sister, dead 3 years, buried on another world. He claimed the statue had her face, not resembled. Was that the others dismissed it? Shock, fatigue, subcranial hallucination from deep work exposure. Then they looked. Each crewman saw something different, not carved, emerging. The faces shifted subtly, slowly. One man fell to his knees and prayed. Another wept and tried to touch the figure. His fingers left marks on the metal, not scratches. Memories, his own. Brief flashes from his past, etched in negative relief across the chest plate. Images that faded as he pulled away. The metal wasn't reflecting. It was remembering. By midday, a new rule had to be enforced. No more than one man to a statue. Observation caused convergence. Two crewmen, staring at the same form, would report distinct faces until inevitably, one description began to overwrite the other. The stronger memory always won. The other observer would then forget who they had seen entirely. One worker stood for hours, eyes locked on a statue that resembled nothing familiar. When questioned, he asked what day it was. Then he asked what year. Then he asked what year meant. He was sedated. His last words were a whisper. "It's not a statue. It's what's left of attention." The Magos on-site, Ivren Kota, ordered full containment. Lead shielding, scrambler fields. No direct eye contact. All statues were to be surrounded by blind drones, mapped only through Auspex echo. When they tried to lift one, it resisted. Not weight. Will.grav lifts, overloaded, servo harnesses snapped. But when they turned away, the statues moved. Not repositioned, recontextualized. One moment they stood among scaffolding. The next, they were 5 meters back, arranged along the chamber's edge once more. Same intervals, same silence. The team rotated out. Fresh crews were brought in. The new arrivals brought new faces, and the statues changed again. One of the new workers vomited on sight. He claimed the figure in front of him had his own face, aged, mutilated, screaming. When he blinked, it was gone. But others began seeing their own deaths, futures that hadn't happened yet, or hadn't happened here. Shifts were shortened. Documentation was ceased. Observation became too expensive. Psychologically, spiritually, neurologically, the statues weren't inert. They were reactive memory cores, repositories not of data, but of recognition. They responded to the observer's perception, pulled from the well of subjective memory, and wore it like armor. A field theorist from the Adeptus Cognita suggested they were reality anchors, that Angros 7 wasn't unstable, it was excessively stable, overwritten by too many impressions at once, that the statues were safeties, locks, not on doors, but on interpretation itself. They were not there to be worshipped. They were there to remind. Magos Coda disagreed. She claimed they were mirrors, not literal, not optical, conceptual, memory engines cast in metal. She called them sympathetic armor, claimed they were shaped not by thoughts, but by the weight of remembrance. She looked into one herself. For 13 seconds, her servoskull recorded it. What she saw was not a person, it was a structure, familiar, the room she stood in, but filled, populated, not by humans, not by Xenos, but by figures shaped of brass and thought, each statue facing inward toward the central disk, not in reverence, but in expectation. She collapsed, recovered, refused to speak for 2 days. When she did, she asked, "What happens when a memory becomes lonely?" No one answered. That night, a low-frequency vibration echoed across the southern end of the chamber. The statues had changed again. Now they were facing inward, all of them, toward the hole. The disk was no longer empty inside, a single sphere, black, seamless, floating 1 meter above the ground. No one touched it. It hummed. When Auspex attempted to scan, it crashed. When picked feeds tried to capture, they recorded static. But one operator's feed picked up something else, not an image, a word. Etched in voxband, across 5 seconds of distortion, uncurped. The operator did not understand it, but one of the statues did. It moved. No one saw it walk. It was simply elsewhere, closer looking. Back, the footage was not discovered by order, not flagged, not classified. It was found by accident and exhausted sanitation servitor, retrieving discarded units from a malfunctioning waste chute near the colony's outer rim. The data slate was unmarked, no seal, no owner, but its battery was intact, and when activated, it played one continuous feed, uncut, unedited, perfectly stabilized. The date stamp placed at 3 cycles. Prior to the blackout of Hablock 9, the video began with the Overseer Keller Harn walking alone. No escort, no Vox channel, active, no bodyguard servitors at his side. He moved without hesitation, in full uniform, through the east boundary, access gate, and into the exclusion zone surrounding the Veil. Canyons. The exclusion zone was standard established to prevent unauthorized access to the unstable ridgelines following subsurface collapse. During early extraction cycles, no one went in, no one returned when they did, but Harn did not hesitate. He passed through the perimeter field, deactivated the warning beacons with a gesture, and descended the shale slope without a stumble. The footage followed from a fixed angle, as if the slate were hovering on a silent servo drone. There were no footsteps behind him, no wind, just silence and sunlight and a faint glint of frost along the canyon walls, though the weather logs showed heat that day. Harn moved, as if returning home, at minute 16. He paused beside a ridge that formed the mouth of the canyon's throat. He looked up, not around, up. His lips moved. The recording had no audio, but later, lip readers reconstructed a single phrase, spoken twice, "I am within specification." Then he stepped forward, 1 footfall, 2, and on the third, he vanished. Not a fade, not a flicker. No displacement field, no energy signature. One moment he stood within frame, the next, the space was empty. No dust, no shadow, no lingering thermal ghost, just absence. Frame by frame analysis confirmed, he did not leave. He ceased. The data slate ended there. No subsequent log, no return journey. But the next day, his voice returned, first in the command hall, his usual tone, issuing standard directives through the colony's internal vox. Confident, authoritative, precise. Magos, initiate system recalibration, cycle 3A. Begin resource audit. Enforcer Kellen, adjust patrol routes around Sector Juno. Civil unrest projection exceeds tolerance. His staff obeyed. They didn't question. It was Harn's voice, his cadence, his protocols. But when officers sought his physical presence, his quarters were empty. He had not returned to his office. Surveillance showed no entry. When attempts were made to trace the signal, they triangulated it to one location, inside the canyon, the same point where he disappeared. Further commands followed, schedules revised, manufacturing cycles optimized, personnel rotations updated with uncanny precision adjustments that resolved conflicts days before they occurred. The colony ran better than it ever had, but no one saw him. After a week, someone asked, "Overseer Harn, what is your current location?" A pause, static. Then, "I am where you place me." Silence followed. Then a new command, routine as ever. No one asked again. The canyon was placed under restricted status. Observation teams deployed Auspex drones to scan the mouth, hoping for any trace of warp residue, teleportation markers, or atmospheric anomalies. None returned. Some never came back. Others drifted aimlessly until batteries failed, spinning silently in the dust, like toys with no hand left to win them. Eventually, the canyon's edges began to change, not collapse, not erosion, shift. The walls, subtly re-angled, realigned, forming angles that bent light in the wrong direction. Shadows stretched not toward sunset, but toward sound. A whisper from one side of the ridge could be heard clearly on the opposite end, but not between. The canyon had become a resonator, a place designed not for echo, but for reply. Then came the orders no one wanted to follow. Construction plans, habitation modules, survey shafts, reinforced bulkheads extending inward into the canyon, toward the vanishing point. Overseer Harn's voice insisted on expansion. Make space ready. Memory requires frame. The Magos refused. The Administratum resisted. Then, without warning, all remaining archived protocols, plans, safety regulations, habitat standards wrote themselves, not corrupted, updated, as if they had always included these orders. And beside each new directive, a signature. Keller Harn verified. He began speaking to individuals in dreams, first quietly, then nightly. His former adjutant, a woman named Della Bryn, awoke one morning weeping. She had been shown a vision of the colony built not across the crust, but within it. A city that breathed with the same cadence as the overseer's voice. She said, "He's not commanding, he's remembering. We are what he recalls." Her eyes never closed again. The canyon's mouth eventually sealed, not with stone, with perception. Maps stopped including it. The coordinates blurred. People passed by without seeing it. When asked, they described only cliffs, no opening. But the orders kept coming. Every morning, a fresh string of Vox directives issued from a non-existent room. The room number corresponded to a service closet beneath the old data spine. No Vox unit existed inside, just walls, and on the walls, frost. It never melted. One tech apprentice tried to chip it away. Beneath the frost, etched deep into the stone, a phrase appeared. "I never left. You followed. Overseer, Kellerhorn was officially declared active, not missing, not deceased. He still runs the colony, and beneath the surface, the canyon waits not silent, not still, just remembering how to shape the next step. They were deployed at dawn, under orders calibrated from Magos Virel's updated threat index. 12 Skittery of the Steel Rune Phalanx, Pattern Zaytaro, assigned to patrol the southern ridge overlooking the canyon mouth. Routine deployment. Unambiguous terrain. Direct line of sight. 17 minutes into their advance, all telemetry ceased. No warning, no interference. One moment, flawless signal. The next void dot, the cohort vanished, not just from from time.chrono-synced. Units across the colony registered no spatial breach, no energy distortion, no warp anomaly. They were not destroyed. They were not displaced. They were simply absent. 43 minutes later, they returned. No announcement, no sound. The ridge's monitors flared briefly as 12 distinct life signs re-entered the grid. No damage, no signal. Each unit in perfect formation standing still. Optics active, weapons sheathed. They did not move. When approached, they did not respond. Not hostile, not dormant. Alert, upright, postured with uncanny stillness. When direct command Vox signals were issued, the cohort replied with confirmation tones. Their programming remained. They identified command rank. They verified chain of logic. They acknowledged presence. But they did not obey. No movement followed orders. No action followed protocol. They simply remained watching. Always up. Toward the stars. Magos Virel initiated deep diagnostic sweeps. Each unit was placed under isolate lock, removed from external interface, and interrogated through binary scrutiny. Neural cores showed no corruption. Combat subroutines were intact. Memory partitions were ... blank. From 5 hours 43 minutes and 12 seconds to 6 hours 26 minutes and 19 seconds. No data. Complete void. The logs resumed with this line. Signal interpreted. Awaiting further context. No source. No signature. Just the sentence, burned into their cortical stacks like a final command. They were never meant to hear. Attempts to rewrite their directive pathways failed. Each attempt produced the same error. Overwriting denied. Integrity, absolute. Their minds had become sealed vaults, not corrupted, not protected. Resolved. 1 unit, designate Hecron 12, allowed limited inquiry. When a Techodept posed a direct query, "What do you await?" it turned its head slightly. First motion in hours, no Vox speech. Instead, it pulsed a phrase across its ocular grill, in low-band strobe. When the shape is named, we move. They were returned to the field, not because they were useful, because they were inert. Yet something in their posture unnerved the command. Hierarchy, they did not stand like machines. They stood like witnesses. Each night, they repositioned, slightly, not wandering, not patrolling, just shifting. Always with line of sight to the sky. Astronomical logs noted a pattern in their orientation. They aligned to a specific star cluster, not currently visible in the sector. When queried, cogitator logs insisted the pattern was impossible. The cluster did not exist. It had not been catalogued by the Adeptus nor mapped by Imperial Cartographers, and yet the skittery aligned to it with unerring precision, as if tracking a sun that refused to rise. One of the junior a datacant prodigy named Relin Asta, attempted to speak to them, not through command structure, through mimicry. She wrote code based on their strobe rhythms, constructing responses in pulse binary. For 3 nights, there was no reaction. On the 4th, all 12 turned their heads toward her. As one, her Vox recorder shorted. All lights in her workshop dimmed. A low tone filled the air below human hearing. Some described it as a pressure behind the eyes. Others claimed it sounded like glass, remembering it had once been sand. Then one word appeared on her personal data. Slate. A word she never typed. A word the mechanicus did not recognize. Effigy. Afterward. She did not return to her quarters. Her bunk was untouched. Her cogitator systems were wiped clean. No sign of forced entry. Just a single line etched into her desk, scored deep with a laser stylus she never owned. I am not the one being watched. Following this, the Skittery were given clearance to remain undisturbed. They were listed as non-operative active presences, a classification that had no precedent. They did not eat, they did not speak, they did not sleep, but one by one, each began carving, into stone, into metal, into soil, always the same shape, a spiral, not circular, not closed, with 13 turns, always incomplete. When overlaid, the spirals mapped onto the colony layout, not its current configuration, but something else, a design, a city not built, but remembered. One tech priest noticed the pattern aligned with Vox transmission nodes buried deep in the bedrock hold lines, no longer active, predating the colony itself. The spiral pulsed with rhythm, a signal. When interpreted through audio filters, it produced a tone, and behind the tone, breath. Inhale, hold, wait. Still no exhale. One night, 3 of the Skittery walked into the canyon. They did not return. Their absence was not mourned. The remaining 9 simply adjusted their stances. Their optics shifted downward, not into the canyon, not into the soil, but inward, as if watching themselves. It began as a rumor, as most things do on dying worlds. A voice in the dark, not a broadcast, not a sanctioned liturgy, just a man speaking beneath the broken scaffolds of Manufactorum Delta. No lumen, no amplifier, just breath, words, and night. No one knew who he was. No title, no ecclesiastical markings. Some claimed he wore the red of a forgotten cardinal adept. Others swore they saw servo scars on his palms, like a failed tech priest who had turned from the machine. One worker said his robe was woven from void ash and memory. Another said there was no robe at all, only outline, only voice. But he preached no proclamations, no fury, no threats of damnation or promises of salvation, just quiet instruction, as if reading aloud from a book none could see, but all had always known. His tone never rose, never cracked, calm fluid, measured like the ticking of a timepiece that had never stopped, and always in darkness. Each sermon was held in complete blackout, no lumens permitted, no auspex, no picked captures. Any attempt to illuminate the space-failed lamps dimmed, power cells drained, even ocular augments shuttered themselves. It was not fear, not coercion, it was necessity. The dark made him real. Those who attended the first gathering said nothing afterward, not from trauma, not from simply because words no longer sufficed. Some stopped speaking entirely for days. Others wept without knowing why. One man went blind and never sought healing, claiming his eyes had been made obsolete. By the 3rd sermon, the gatherings grew. Miners, off-duty enforcers, unregistered even Mechanicus adepts. No orders were given, no flyers, no calls. They simply arrived. As if pulled, the preacher spoke of structures not made of matter, but of obedience, of cities that nested inside skulls, of footsteps older than planets, and of he who does not dwell above but around. You are not in his sight, he said. You are inside his thought. The sermons began to follow a pattern. First came silence, then breath, then speech. Each began with a description not of doctrine, but of architecture. A door that only opens inward, a stairwell with no descent, a throne carved from understanding. These were not metaphors, they were invitations. No one recorded him. Even when attempts were made, recorders failed. Cogitator logs returned only static. One device burned out entirely, emitting a high-pitched whine that forced two adepts to vomit. On the sixth night, a Mechanicus scribe attempted to challenge him. She spoke aloud, questioned his source, his origin, his right to speak. There was no reply, not from the preacher, but from the walls. A voice echoed, not his, not hers. Something vast, cold, not angry, disappointed. He asked for silence. You insisted on sound. The scribe collapsed, her mind intact, her body whole, but she never used language again. Her every movement from that day forward was arranged as if in choreography, measured, ritualistic, even when eating, even when sleeping. After the seventh sermon, attendees stopped acknowledging others. They didn't isolate, they simply disengaged. Conversations ended mid-sentence. Friendships dissolved without grief. Lovers slept apart without pain. They did not forget. They simply withdrew. Each of them carried something now, not visible, but felt that, as if listening for an echo, no one else could hear. Then came the eighth sermon, the final gathering. No one knows how many attended. The plaza was full and silent. No whisper, no breath, no shuffle of boots. The preacher's voice did not begin with speech. He hummed, a single note, held too long for any human lung. The sound was cold, perfect, and then he said, "You are inside him now." No elaboration, no farewell, no blessing. And he was gone, not disappeared, concluded, as if the act of saying those words had been the final line in a script long, predetermined. His followers remained, silent, still. They didn't speak. They glowed, not light, not radiation. Recognition. Their skin shimmered faintly in dim light, in inner phosphorescence, like heat remembered by glass. Auspex couldn't measure it. Medicae scans returned clean. Vox recordings captured no emission, but they glowed, and in darkness, they pulsed, not randomly, in rhythm. 40-6 seconds on. Pause. Repeat the same rhythm as the breathing walls, the same cycle as the signal beneath the crust. They became part of the structure. Administratum. Records marked them as non-violent anomalies. Cleansing orders were drafted, then rescinded. No one could explain why. One inquisitorial acolyte requested extermination protocol. He submitted the forms, attached a full threat assessment, detailed doctrine heresy violations. 3 days later, he revoked the request. The reason cited, "I understand now." He was not seen again. The sermons ceased, but the darkness remained. Whole sectors of Ankros, 7 now dim at dusk unnaturally. Lights fail, Vox static rises, and sometimes, just before sleep, civilians whisper to themselves a phrase they don't recall learning. They do not know why it comforts them. They do not know where they heard it. They do not question. They simply breathe and say, "You are inside him now." The reactor had been dead for decades. Designate T-98, an obsolete fusion engine buried beneath the collapsed manufactorum substructure. Sealed off after the first meltdowns rendered the zone too unstable for reclamation. The only records left described it as irrecoverable, its core fractured beyond containment, its fuel exhausted. No team had entered since the sector was decommissioned. It should have remained silent forever. But then it began to hum. Not at once, not loudly. A single note first barely perceptible above the subsonic churn of the cooling shafts. It threaded itself between the rusted ducts and silent pipes like a memory too faint to recognize but too familiar to forget. The workers stationed nearest to the ruins reported nothing, only a sensation and unease, like being spoken to from far away, not with urgency, with patience. The hum grew. It did not intensify in volume. It thickened, layered. Over days, more tones joined at harmonics, folding inward, not building outward. The sound pressed into the bones of the structure, vibrating through walls, seeping into conduit channels, becoming atmosphere, and then came the words, at first only fragments, caught on corrupted vox feeds layered under static. Short phrases that didn't translate, not by not Gothic, not any known Mechanicus encryption, but they felt familiar. Tech Adept Sale was the first to recognize the dialect not from study, but from dream. She woke one morning with dried blood beneath her nose and a phrase clinging to her teeth. She scrawled it onto a data slate before she forgot. Spine of memory, rib of light. Cross-referencing old archives yielded nothing, but when she spoke the phrase aloud inside the ruined manufacturum just meters from reactor, T-98 the humming shifted, not stopped, responded. The engine sang back. The tech priests descended in full sanctified regalia. Servo skulls worry overhead, incense thick in the stale air. Their canticles began as standard purification hymns, machine spirit awakenings, rites of silence and denial. The hum swallowed them. Their voices were absorbed. The more they intoned, the more the engine adapted, harmonizing with their words, then twisting them, returning altered cadences, counter hymns in impossible scales. And then the rebellion began. The first augmetic failure was minor, an ocular lens blinking erratically, its calibration offset by fractions of a degree. Then came twitches, limbs jerking, implants misfiring. A tech priest collapsed mid-chant, his vocal modulator coughing static. But the failures weren't random, they were rhythmic. One tech priest's mechadendrites began to sway, not in malfunction, but in time with the engine's hum. Another's cogitator displayed looping messages he never typed, lines of archaic scripture ending with the same phrase, join the breath of the root. They tried to isolate the engine, set up scrambler fields, sent shutdown pulses, brought in portable dampeners. Each attempt triggered deeper resonance. The structure vibrated with layered frequencies, impossible to isolate or trace. Every surface became part of the sound, and beneath it, words kept forming. Forgotten dialects, not lost languages, unspoken ones, ritualized architecture phonemes shaped by materials. One priest claimed the metal itself was enunciating, its alloy composition forming syllables through vibration. When asked how she knew, she answered, "Because I am alloy too." She smiled as her eyes rolled back. The next morning her chest plate bore a new sigillet clean through. It didn't match any known forge mark, legion icon, or linguistic root, but when held beneath auspex, it hummed in resonance with the engine's pulse. The others began to change, not corrupted, aligned. Servolimbs moved without thought, not involuntarily. They began to finish each other's sentences, chant phrases they'd never studied. Augmetics once requiring conscious command, now acted in perfect sequence with the engine's cycles. One tech priest stood for 12 hours, eyes closed, arms raised. Every 5 minutes, he whispered, "It remembers better than we ever learned." An attempt was made to forcibly extract him. The servitors assigned to the task refused, not stopped in place, turned around, returned to their stations. When asked for explanation, one unit responded with a phrase, not in its programming. "You do not silence a choir with fewer voices." Panic began to ripple through the outer command ranks. Orders were issued to purge the site, to decouple the sector entirely, to seal the structure, and vent the ruins into the canyon. The engine answered. Every power cell in the adjacent districts surged. Vox units reversed signal flow. Emergency lights pulsed in sequence, 40-6 seconds. Hold, repeat, the same rhythm, the same breath, the same pulse that now defined the colony's nights. One final command was issued to Magos Virel from an inquisitorial liaison. Shut it down. He descended into the manufactorum alone. The logs record his presence for 7 minutes. At the 8th, all sensors lost him. He did not return. The next morning, the engine's hum changed. It sang a new note, and beneath it, his voice soft, centered, Calm, he said. It is not a machine. It is a memory that sings itself back into matter. No one else entered the ruins, but those who passed nearby claimed they felt lighter, as if their bodies were not being lifted, but remembered more clearly. They stood straighter, breathed deeper. Some wept for reasons they could not name, and the engine sang on. The first vessel to attempt departure was the Hollow Marrow, an ore hauler retrofitted for atmospheric escape. It launched as scheduled, engines stable, course logged and approved. It ascended cleanly 10,000 meters, 20, 40 until the cloud line vanished and space opened, above, like it always had. Except it hadn't. The U-spec showed soil, not orbital telemetry, not stellar maps, not open void, just terrain, shifting, changing, familiar in the way dreams are, familiaric, formations from the mining flats, gulches from the canyon verge, outlines of the manufactorum ruins, but wrong, tilted, inverted. The sky was no longer overhead. It was beneath them, and it was watching. The Hollow Marrow froze in position, engines still burning, guidance systems still blinking green, but forward movement ceased, not resisted, not countered, simply denied, as if the ship had reached the edge of something that refused to recognize it. No impact, no force field, just refusal. The vox chatter turned erratic, first confusion, then laughter. Nervous, broken. Crew began reporting vertigo, not from motion, but from stillness. One tech described it as floating inside the memory of gravity. Then came the voices, not from the ship. From the outside, the command bridge caught a brief echo across long-range Vox 3 seconds of signal distortion. Too clean to be artifact, too real to be noise. You do not rise from within. Dissent was your first language. The crew began to lose cohesion. Orders repeated. Tasks undone. No discipline breakdown, just They forgot which doors led where. They stopped distinguishing between rooms. One officer walked into a bulkhead, stopped, stared, and said quietly, "This isn't where I was born." The captain ordered emergency descent. Nothing happened. The ship remained fixed in position. Instruments showed lateral drift, but exterior feeds showed stillness. No stars, just ground. The same terrain, over and over, looped, reassembled. Then the crew began to dig. It started with one, a junior engineer, quiet, stable, with no prior psychological flags. He took a plasma cutter to the aft corridor, kneeling on the floor and carving slow, precise lines through the decking. When restrained, he wept not in fear, but in failure. "They're down there," he whispered. "They're waiting for us to finish returning." Others followed. One broke open a service panel and began tearing through insulation, whispering to himself in a voice not his own. A navigator gutted the wall behind his console, hands bleeding, nails broken, repeating, "Down is where the truth went." They weren't trying to escape, they were trying to go home. By the third day, the ship had been sealed from the outside. No contact, no response. The lights still pulsed, the engines still hummed, but no one answered. A second vessel, the Ardent Reclaim, was dispatched with inquisitorial clearance. Their mission was simple: confirm or deny atmospheric entrapment. They launched on a pure vertical burn, trajectory locked by orbital cogitators. 30 seconds after launch, they disappeared from ground-based AUSPEX. Reported success. They claimed to have broken orbit, claimed to see stars. Then their sensors recalibrated, the stars inverted, their nav maps folded, and before any new coordinates could be locked, their window showed dust, not space. Ground. Close. Immediate, inches from the VIEWPORT, as if the vessel was suspended inside soil too vast to comprehend. Not pressure, presence. A tech adept aboard attempted to broadcast their position manually. His signal never left the ship. It folded inward, played back in reverse through the crew's vox beads. Each word now a question. What is altitude? What is surface? What is origin? The adept tore out his vox bead. Blood sprayed the wall. It didn't fall. It curled, a soft loop of movement, like mist remembering how to become liquid. The crew of the Ardent Reclaim ceased communication after 11 hours. Not silence, just static, with one constant tone underneath a resonance matching the harmonic patterns of the reactor that sang. Another ship followed, then another, then none. Attempts to escape became rare, then taboo, eventually forbidden. Those in orbit, docked, or stationed above, reported a different horror. They could see the planet clearly, its crust, clouds, even the soft glint of mineral veins through polar ranges. But when they tried to calculate distance, their instruments returned impossible metrics. Some claimed to be only meters away from the surface. Others claimed they were beneath it. One pilot activated external lights to clarify visual feedback. The feed showed illumination striking not rock but eyes. Reflections. A mirrored gaze. The captain called for emergency recall. His crew disobeyed, not in defiance. In distraction, they had begun dismantling the cockpit floor. He asked why. They answered, because this is where the light came from, and we need to remember what it touched. The ship vanished within the hour. No explosion, no warp rupture, just absence, and then the sky changed. Not color, not motion. Recognition. It bent slightly, not physically, cognitively. The colony's citizens began to experience it differently. They stopped calling it sky. They called it the ceiling of the breath. They no longer asked what lay above. They began to ask who had built it, and why it still waited. One child, watching the dusk settle, whispered a question her parents did not understand. When do we go deeper? No answer was needed. The ships no longer tried to leave, and the stars no longer tried to shine. They had been asked to wait, and they obeyed. It started subtly. A single personnel file marked deceased. 3 months prior you appeared in the active duty roster. No resurrection protocol, no grave exhum. The name simply returned, embedded in the daily shift manifest as if it had never left. When queried, the system returned a clean audit trail. No edits, no intrusion, just continuity. The man in question was never found. His bunk was empty, his sector untouched, but his signature now appeared on maintenance reports. His voice recorded in his access code used in the coolant tunnels. When security dispatched a detail to verify his presence, they found his uniform neatly folded in his locker. The fabric was warm, then came the rest. Casualty records across the colony began purging themselves. Over 100 logged deaths across the last cycle were quietly removed from the rolls. Families noticed first but said nothing, not out of fear, because they recognized the change. They remembered grief, but now their sons, daughters, lovers, and siblings were listed as alive, and they believed it, even when graves remained, even when picts showed funerals that had clearly occurred, even when some citizens still wore mourning pins on their uniforms. They began to remove them. False memory, one woman said as she unfastened hers. I must have dreamed the loss. No one challenged her. The population count stabilized. No fluctuation, no births, no deaths, just a perfect number, 118,064. It did not change, even as bodies were carried to the Medicae, even as infants were reported screaming into the recycled air. The system adjusted birth records, began to fill in names no one chose, children listed as born during cycles when no births occurred, units assigned, immunization schedules logged, footprint scans embedded, but no child by that name existed, until someone called it aloud, and then the child answered. A new administrative directive was issued shortly after. Orders arrived stamped with the sigil of the planetary governor, a new one. Not Kellerharn. He was never governor, the system now claimed. His rank had been senior overseer. The new governor's name was O'Lear, Venth. No records existed of his appointment. No swearing-in ceremony. No entry in the Adeptus Terra census. But his orders bore full authorization sigils, auth codes valid, Vox encryption intact, and they came from a building that didn't exist. Sector, crown an empty plot previously designated for expansion, never constructed, no foundations poured, no materials allocated. Yet now, standing above the eastern ridge, a tower shimmered in presence. Not new, established. Weathered stone. High windows, cogitator spires humming in rhythm with the reactor beneath the manufactorum ruins. No, construction logs, but the patrol routes now curved around it. Logistics units rerouted supplies there automatically. Vox channels began with the phrase, "By order of Governor Venth." When surveyors attempted to confirm the structure, they found the perimeter guarded not by troops, but by silence, not absence of sound, rejection of observation. Whatever they brought, lumen drones, picked auspex, the results returned blank. Not static. Indifference. As if the building simply had no interest in being recorded. Those who entered returned with eyes lowered. When asked what they saw, they struggled to answer. One man spoke in fragments. Paper that turns before you reach the end. Rooms shaped like decisions you never made. Doors, with your handwriting on them. Another wept. Not from fear. From certainty. I've been working there for years. He hadn't. His records proved otherwise, until they didn't. Single quotes. 2 days later, his personnel file updated. Current assignment. Sector Crown. Role. Junior Compliance Officer. Supervising Officer. Governor O'Lear. Venth. No one knew what he looked like. There were no images, only a silhouette, etched into the floor of the tower's atrium. A man without detail, cast in black marble. His posture not rigid but listening. The silhouette changed each day, subtly. Sometimes the arms crossed. Sometimes a hand lifted. Sometimes it faced the doors. Sometimes the walls. One Magos declared it, a memory map, a reflection of the building's cognitive architecture. Not a ruler, but a response, a correction. When personnel attempted to challenge his authority file, a procedural conflict, raise a query, they found the forms already submitted, their names signed, their complaints answered in advance. Each explanation was elegant, brief, soothing, and ended with the same phrase, "He remembers what you meant." The administratum stopped resisting. Orders continued. All made sense. All aligned, even when they I-do departments were created, departments of reflection, of continuity, of unbuilding. People reported to them, did tasks they couldn't describe, logged hours that didn't pass, and all of them returned home with paperwork completed and wages disbursed. One woman filed a leave request. It was denied, then approved, then replaced with a different request, one she never made. The date on it was 3 years prior. It bore her signature when shown the document. She nodded. Double quotes, "Yes," she said. "I remember now." She left the next day, no record where. Her room was reassigned, but her toothbrush remained clean. Wet, used. The colony no longer asked who governed it. They accepted, Governor. Venth issued one final decree that cycle. A simple statement, broadcast without sound but received by every device simultaneously. We do not amend the past, we complete it. And the tower stood still, occupied, waiting, and now, finally, correct, it opened without sound, without tremor, without force, at 13:07 local time, under the standard glow of second cycle lumen arrays. The stonework at the center of Ankros, the 7th central square, unfastened itself, not shattered, not broken, peeled. slabs folded back like pages curling in fireless heat. Beneath them, nothing. Not soil, not machine, not void, an absence shaped like a wound, not torn through space, not cut across matter. Something deeper, a rupture in logic. Those who stood closest saw it first, not with eyes, but with comprehension. One man dropped his data slate mid-sentence and stared at it like he had never held language. Another fell to his knees and began reciting the birth dates of strangers. And above the rupture, objects began to fall upward. Dust, first trailing in slow spirals, glittering with impossible hue. Then debris. Then heavier things. A toolbox, a bench, a servitor's ruined chassis, all lifting from the ground with no resistance, no acceleration, and vanishing into the scar's depthless top. Not skyward, not ascendant, just opposite. Witnesses gathered. At first, only workers and idle passers-by. But within minutes, dozens stood in the square, watching, not screaming, not fleeing, remembering. That was the true cost. Not the falling, not the breach, but the drift. Names fled first, not all at once, gradually, gently, like breath slipping between syllables. You would reach for your name, and it would not be there. Not forgotten, miss. In its absence, something else bloomed. New names, foreign syllables. You would say them without knowing why. I was called Dalra once. They knew me as Fen Soren, of the 13th Bridge Choir, under Black Suns. None of these names were native. None were listed in the colony's databanks. But each speaker uttered them with quiet certainty, like turning a corner and seeing a house you've never lived in but recognize. Some wept, others laughed. One enforcer stood transfixed for 4 hours before his comrades pulled him back. His skin had turned pale. His fingertips glowed with faint phosphorescence, a script running beneath the surface like veins rearranged into symbols. He said only this: I saw the underside of time. It has teeth. No one approached the scar after that, but none could leave it either. A perimeter was established, not by force, by impulse. Citizens formed a loose ring around it, not touching, not guarding, just being there, watching. Remembering the administratum declared it a hazard zone. Vox warnings played every 15 minutes, but the people didn't move. They weren't waiting. They were aligning. Then the colors began, not lights. Memory, rendered as hue. It bled from the rift in slow trails, ribbons of tone, with no name in the visible spectrum. Some likened it to smoke, others to silk underwater. One child described it as music that forgot how to be noise. When the colors touched objects, those objects rose. When they touched people, they spoke not aloud. Internally, a flood of image, emotion, detail. One man remembered building a tower in a desert that never existed. Another recalled piloting a ship made of bone. A woman dropped to her knees, whispering, I remember my death. The Inquisition sent a sight. She lasted 13 minutes. Before she collapsed, she laughed and shouted, They're not coming through. We're the opening. Her eyes turned silver. Her tongue evaporated. Her last recorded thought, etched into her autoslate by psychic discharge, was a single phrase. This is not an event. It is a diagnosis. The scar continued to bleed, not widen, just persist. Engineers tried to model it. They failed. The vectors didn't align. Gravity reversed only locally, but mass registered as unchanged. Time passed normally, but memory shifted. Historical logs reconfigured. The colony's founding date moved forward by a decade, then backward by 3, then split into 3 simultaneous entries, each with corroborating evidence. One log claimed Ankros VII had been settled because of the scar. Another said the scar formed during terraforming. A third said it had always been there, hidden beneath the crust, dreaming until it was remembered open. None could be proven false. The governor, Olirventhi, issued a statement. His voice was calm, his tone measured. The scar is not a tear. It is a suture. You are healing incorrectly. This is the correction. His words were followed by silence. Then the names returned, not the old ones, the new ones, permanent, fixed. Each citizen's ID chip rewrote itself. First names, family lineage, genetic tags all replaced. Some bore names in dead languages, others in patterns of sound too complex for human vocal cords. None resisted. It felt true, and when asked why they accepted it, each person gave the same answer, without collusion, without hesitation, because the old names were assigned. These were remembered. The scar did not close. It is not a wound. It is a mirror, turned inward. A structure made of absence, a gravity made of thought, and above it, things still fall upward. Bits of memory, fragments of futures, unchosen, and you, if you stand too close. The cogitator had been buried in the substack ruins of Archive long since decommissioned after the seismic faults rendered its foundation unusable. It was a Mark IX monocore scribal unit, obsolete even by backwater standards. Originally intended for low-priority transcription and backup data mirroring, no one had powered it in over 40 years. No one even remembered it was there, but then it turned on, not gradually, not with a hum or boot sequence. One moment it was a dead machine, cold and dust-strapped. The next, its central lumen blinked once steady, violet-tanned. The screen filled with text, line after line, no prompt, no user, no interface device attached, no connection to any living system, no power source. Its internal core had long been scrapped for parts. The cable routes leading to it had been severed, cut clean when the archive was sealed. The room itself was unpowed and still it wrote. The first few lines were overlooked. Just filler code, someone said. Echoes from old indexing protocols. Perhaps a flicker of stored charge triggered a recursive script. But the lines didn't stop. Paragraphs began to form. Then structure, indents, headings, citations. It wrote, not randomly, but deliberately. And soon, it became clear it wasn't code. It was a manifesto. By the time Mechanicus adepts were dispatched to investigate, it had already produced over 100 pages. They printed as hard copy automatically, the internal printer somehow functioning without spools or ink. Each page bore a title, The Reintegration of Breath. The adepts scanned the paper, expecting heresy, expecting madness. Instead, they found prophecy. The first section detailed the blackout sermons word for word, though they had never been transcribed. The text included direct quotations, reactions from the crowd, even footnotes referencing attendees, unspoken thoughts, all dated 3 days before the first sermon ever occurred. The second section chronicled the return of the Skittery cohort, listing their precise formation at the ridge and the phrase signal interpreted, awaiting further context. This section was written for days prior to their disappearance. Then came the future. Events not yet recorded. Situations that, at the time of discovery, had not happened, but they would. Within hours, a roof collapse in the eastern quarter, the spontaneous reappearance of a forgotten administrative aide, a new birth in a family declared infertile by 3 generations of Medicaid scans. Every phrase matched, word for word. At first panic, the Inquisition prepared to purge the terminal, but each time they initiated shutdown, the cogitator responded preemptively by printing a warning. This attempt is unnecessary. The result is acceptance. And it was. The commands were cancelled. Not out of fear, out of inevitability. One page described an inquisitorial acolyte standing in hesitation before a senior officer, unsure why his hand refused to move. The page was written 5 minutes before it happened. He read it, then stepped back. Permission withdrawn. He said the pages continued, over 700 by the second week, each page a new piece of a structure. None of them could fully grasp. Not a narrative, not prophecy. Design. Each phrase, each entry, each footnote operated as a load-bearing event. The colony began adapting, not through order, through rhythm. People began waking at times, not set by alarm, but by page. Work assignments shifted in accordance with paragraphs yet to be written. Maintenance was performed preemptively before the failures the cogitator described ever occurred. The future was being remembered forward. One date-adept option Clem made the mistake of searching for his own name. He found it. Page 431. It described his suicide. It listed the time, the place, the words. He would whisper to himself before leaping from the North Observatory. He did not want to die. But when the time came, he stood in the observatory. He did not jump. He waited. Nothing happened. And the cogitator printed a new page. Refusal observed. Pattern adjusted. His name vanished from page 431. A new name appeared. Someone else. Someone who had taken his place in the schedule of loss. Option ran. Fled the colony perimeter. He screamed that he would not be written. But 3 days later, a page appeared. He returns. He forgets why he left. He weeps, but smiles. And he did. He came back barefoot, thin eyes full of dust. He smiled, and he began transcribing the pages himself, by hand, word for word. No one asked him to. They just left parchment and ink on the desk beside the cogitator. Eventually, the cogitator stopped printing. It didn't run out of memory. It didn't shut down. It simply wrote one final phrase. One last page, typed slowly, deliberately. No title, just this. Continue. The screen remains lit, waiting, and if you stand long enough beside it, hand hovering over the keys, you feel something just behind the skin of thought. An unfinished sentence, a breath, waiting for your exhale to begin again. They found it in storage bay 3-0. Between crates of expired ration paste and obsolete lostules, curled in a kneeling position, it was never programmed to assume standard. Labor Class Servitor Model A76. Serial degradation noted. No recent activity logs. No assignment orders in over 2 cycles. No one had a reason to check that bait. It wasn't on the rotation anymore, and yet, it was weeping. The sound was unmistakable. Soft, wet, sobs irregular, organic, trembling like a child, gasping through grief. No voice, modulator, no mouth. Its entire vocal unit had been cauterized decades ago, replaced with a silent task affirmation node. The ports were sealed. The cavity was soldered shut. Still, the sobs came vibrating in the air, moistening the floor beneath its bowed head. When Tech Adept Nara approached, she expected lubricant leakage, malfunction, fluid bleeding from a ruptured pump, maybe a failing cranial buffer, but it wasn't oil. It was saline. Human tears, not artificial, not synthesized, not harvested. Real. Chemical analysis confirmed it. Sodium chloride in correct ratios, trace organic proteins, cellular debris, all consistent with emotional crying, not pain, not synthetic reflex. Emotion. Even more disturbing. The tears carried DNA, not spliced, not composite, whole strands, stable, fully human. But when they tried to match the genetic profile, they hit classification protocols beyond the Mechanicus hierarchy. The chain ended not at a file, but at a phrase. Origin denied. Memory sealed. Magos Virel was notified, though he hadn't been seen since the reactor had begun to sing. His office door opened on its own when the report was submitted. No one inside, only the faint echo of humming. The servitor remained in the bay, unmoving, still sobbing. No one could stop it. Attempts to power it down failed, not because of resistance, because the unit no longer had a power source. The battery had long since corroded. Internal capacitors were dust. It should not have functioned. It should not have remembered how to exist. Its neural circuitry was melted, burned beyond recovery. Memory cores slagged, motor functions offline, and yet, it trembled, it flinched when approached. It tried to speak. No voice, no words, just the attempt. The body surged with muscle patterns it hadn't been programmed to retain. Its torso heaved, not hydraulic rhythm, breathing, a mimicry of breath. So convincing that two Medicae observers instinctively matched pace with it. One collapsed from hyperventilation. The other wept alongside it. Later, when isolated and scanned, they found something else. Symbols etched inside the servitor's skull casing. Not carved, grown, patterns woven into the metal like veins of instinct, shaping loops and spirals that pulsed faintly under auspex, scribed unknown, but not dead. Alive. When subjected to harmonic frequency from the reactor's song, the symbols began to resonate, and the servitor sang back, not with tone, with tremor, a full-body vibration that formed a harmonic lattice in the surrounding air. Those in proximity experienced synesthetic effects, tasting color, seeing sound, remembering things they never lived. One adept dropped to her knees and cried out the name of a sibling she never had. The servitor turned toward her and paused. Its head tilted slightly, and it wept harder, as if mourning her loss. That's when the logs changed. Across the colony, maintenance records updated themselves. Anywhere this unit had once worked, forgotten corridors, power conduits, substack waste rooms, new annotations appeared. Not errors. Apologies. Here I dropped the bolt and let it rust. Here I watched her cry and did nothing. Here I was part of the forgetting. Each phrase matched known errors in colony function from over 20 cycles ago. Functions never resolved. Incidents blamed on entropy, coincidence, decay. But now they had authorship. Responsibility. Remorse. No servitor had ever displayed that capacity. Servitors obey, serve, persist. They do not regret, and yet this one mourned, not for itself, for us. For the colony, for the forgetting, for the choices that had been buried under duty and repetition and silence. It became a site of pilgrimage, quietly, without orders. People began to visit, not to observe, to sit, to be near it. Some brought items, gifts, tokens, fragments of memory, not to please, just to share. One man left a childhood drawing. The servitor shuddered. A single tear fell, heavier than the others, and evaporated on the floor in a puff of fragrant steam. The scent, lavender. No one could explain why, but the man wept, too. Later, when the servitor was moved, to no effect. Still kneeling, still crying, a new inscription was found beneath it, etched into the metal plating. Burned by no known tool. The machine remembers your weight. Your shadow is still warm, and beside it, a second phrase, you are not the forgotten thing. You are the forgetting. The sobbing never stopped, and neither did the visitors. The machine that wept remains where it was placed. Storage no longer. Sanctuary now. A cathedral of wires and memory and tears. Still kneeling, still trembling, still human, in ways no flesh remembers how to be. The first report came from Medicae Vault 6, where a routine autopsy of a collapsed sanitation worker was halted mid-procedure. Not because of trauma, not because of violence, because his ribcage had moved, not spasmed, not twitched in post-mortem discharge. It turned 12 degrees inward, tightening toward the spine in a spiral that resembled no known human or Xeno's anatomy. The Medicae had been slicing through the abdominal cavity when the cartilage responded, tensing, resisting, as if preserving something, or guarding. The corpse was declared anomalous, sealed for further study. Within days, 3 more appeared, all unrelated. Different ages, different causes of death, but the same mutation. Bones bending where bones should not, elbows femurs curling into coils, vertebrae detaching and rethreading themselves into double helixes that glistened in the scanner like runes. But the strangest part, was the intent. These were not random mutations, not chaotic warp flaws or degenerative diseases. These changes were purposeful. Each set of remains had adjusted itself into a new geometry, functional, deliberate, as though obeying a new schematic not yet entered into the Mechanicus lexicon. End. Then they began to move. Not the freshly dead, the long-buried remains pulled from sealed morgues and bones dry as memory, silent for decades. One morning, the morgue attendants entered Storage Vault 3 Lima to find 6 bodies, standing upright, unsupported, no cerebos, no necrotic tissue, just bone, there, articulated, and swaying slightly in a rhythm that had nothing to do with balance. They were not animated. They were awake, and they moved as if they recognized you. Each skeleton displayed unique tics, a limp, a shoulder roll, a hand gesture repeated endlessly, like an unfinished sign. Medicaid staff began identifying these movements not generically, but personally. That twitch, that pacing rhythm, that's my father. She used to brush her hair like that. He used to crack his knuckles when thinking. DNA confirmed the matches. The bodies were who they had once been, but not reanimated. Their tissues were long gone, their organs dust, and yet they stood, not staring, just waiting. Some began walking, no destination, just forward, down halls, through alleys, across the colony's wide plazas. People cleared a path, not from fear, from recognition. One woman fell to her knees as a skeletal figure passed her. She whispered, "You taught me to read." She didn't know his name, but her tears fell with certainty, and the skeleton paused. Its skull inclined slightly, then it moved on. Autopsies were forbidden, dissections failed. Bones refused incision, instruments dulled, scanners fuzzed, and all attempts to log the internal changes returned the same line, "Not yours to define." The Mechanicus declared them ontological anomalies. The administratum issued denials. The people called them echoes, no to alike. Each formed from bone restructured not by decay, but by revision. New ligaments of unknown material, joints reversing to accommodate gaits that had never been taught, only remembered. They did not speak, but they taught. One was seen tracing symbols into the dust, circular diagrams, looping with no center. A child watched for hours, then began drawing the same symbol in his sleep. Another skeleton stood for 3 days in front of a broken lift, lifting its hand every 11 minutes. After the 3rd day, the lift began to work. No repairs had been made, no energy rerouted. It simply obeyed. Because it was being remembered into function, some of the dead began to return to their homes, or what remained of them. A pile of bricks, a scorch-marked floor, a ventilation shaft long decommissioned. They stood nearby not claiming, not haunting anchoring. One echo walked into a chapel and lay flat against the altar for 19 hours. When it rose, the prayers of the next sermon came out in reversed syllables that made the statues hum. When the preacher spoke, he said only, "They are not visitors, they are instruction." The Inquisition tried to intervene. A purgation team was dispatched. They opened fire on 3 echoes near the governor's tower. Every round missed, not dodged, refused. The bullets curved, shivered, fell to the ground, softened as if memory had reclassified them as harmless. The Inquisitor in charge screamed blasphemy, ordered flame, ordered steel, and then he froze. One echo was staring at him, skull tilted, its jaw opened, and the Inquisitor fell to his knees, not in pain, in remorse. He said, "I remember the words I forgot to say," and he wept into his gloves. No echo touched him. They turned and walked away. Later, his own bones began to twist. He did not resist. He sat quietly as his spine reshaped itself and whispered, "Correction accepted." Now, they move freely, The colony does not question. Some still avert their eyes. Others greet them by name. One man opened his door each morning, bowed to the skeletal figure standing outside, and said, "Thank you for watching me grow." The echo never replied, but it remained, and the man never stumbled again. The bones had stopped obeying the body. They had begun obeying something older. Something that knew how to arrange a person not by biology, but by meaning, and meaning, once made, does not die, it walks. They were charting a valley that didn't exist the day before. Coordinates had placed it as a flat basalt shelf near the eastern fringe, but at 0400, Auspex picked up a sudden depression several kilometers wide, lined with symmetrical ridges like ribs, perfectly mirrored on both sides. The explorator teams were dispatched. Standard protocol: survey, scan, sample, withdraw. They never reached the far edge, because between their second and third steps into the valley, time began to stretch. To the exterior observers watching from surveillance blimps and static Auspex towers, the 12 explorers moved forward, then stopped, mid-stride, frozen. No twitch, no shift, not even wind disturbing their robes. For 4 hours, they stood motionless. Then suddenly, they moved again, each one taking the next step as if no time had passed. A blink between strides, except for them. It had not been a blink when they returned, shaken, quiet, altered. Their internal chronometers told a different story. Time stamped by cerebral implants. 3 of them logged 47 hours of experience. 1 logged 82. The lead Magos, Rethveren, logged 321. All of it between steps. Between the lift of one boot and the placing of another. Inside that moment, they were not alone. They each described it differently. One said she stood in a hall that never ended. Walls made of absence, columns shaped from decisions she had not made. Another said he floated in a space that whispered, "You are late," over and over, in a voice shaped like his father's. But the central experience was consistent. They were spoken to, not interrogated, not judged, conversed with. Something vast, immense beyond scale, not hostile, not warm, polite, disappointed. It did not speak with words, but with implication. Thought formed around presence. Ideas arrived whole, like memory reversed through meaning. They were asked questions, not factual, personal. What did you discard to become useful? What do you believe would remember you? When did you decide to stay afraid? Answers were not demanded, but offered nonetheless. One explorateur may redacted under inquisitorial. Seal collapsed into laughter during the debrief. His skin had turned gray around the eyes. His breath tasted like crushed glass. He said only this before falling silent forever. It stepped between us to give us time, and we used it to forget. Afterward, his heart stopped. No cause found. No record entered. But the Auspex towers still recorded one anomaly. His shadow remained, fully intact, even after the body was removed. Others could not recall what they said within the dilation. Some remembered nothing at all, just the impression of immense patience. The feeling of being looked at not by a creature, but by a function, a threshold given form, and it was always waiting, not cruelly, not passively, just waiting. Time continued to distort. Other locations across the colony began to demonstrate similar phenomena. Workers entering tool bays would emerge hours later, unaware that they had stood motionless for days. Children froze mid-run, held in the air like puppets between blinks. Each reported the same experience. Something asked them what they hoped to become. One child, when prompted to explain further, drew a spiral, then a box around it, and said, "I made it polite, so it would stay." Explorators returned to the valley, this time with tethered servo skulls, external cognition leashes, and redundant sensory scaffolding. None of it helped. The instant they entered, they froze again. 30-2 hours. then movement. One step. But this time, when they emerged, they weren't confused, they were changed. They spoke in unison, 12 voices, one phrase. The breath between intention is where regret coagulates. They were taken into custody, their minds scanned. No signs of corruption, no warp trace, no demonic intrusion, just absence. When the cogitators tried to map their neurological patterns, they returned incomplete, not damaged, not concealed. Omitted. Whole sections of memory no longer existed, but not erased. Removed deliberately. The logs noted one last anomaly. Each of them had new scars, thin, curved lines across the soles of their feet, exactly where the boot touched ground, as if the surface itself had cut them open to look inside. One, Magos theorized that time had become layered moments folding inward to create depth where none existed, that the valley itself was not terrain, but architecture built from hesitation, of structure where every second was a floor, and they had fallen, not down, through now. Across the colony, people report hesitation differently. A pause in speech feels longer. A second guest becomes an hour lived elsewhere. One woman stopped before entering her home, her hand on the latch. She stood that way for 5 days. When she finally moved, she whispered, "I said no. I said no. I said no." No one asked what she refused. They understood. The thing between steps had asked her to, and she had answered. There are new protocols, now, in areas marked with temporal instability. Signs are posted, step with certainty. The in-between listens, and in the places where it lingers longest, Auspex readings show faint tremors, not seismic, not physical, just possibility. Trying to decide whether it still wants to wait for us or walk instead. It began with a routine request, a standard requisition transmission sent from Ankbras 7 to the subsector Munitorum for additional Medicae supplies and atmospheric scrubber parts. The form was signed, the Vox seal authentic, the coordinates perfect. The request bounced, no explanation, no denial, just rejection. Recipient node not found. A second attempt was made. Then, a third, this time directly to Segmentum Command. No difference. The signal vanished into silence, not jammed, not blocked, not corrupted, simply unreceived, as if there was no place left for it to go. The astropath assigned to long-range communion, Cyrilvox Minor, was the first to understand. She screamed during trance, not from pain, but from disorientation. She said there was nothing, no threads, no golden cords stretching through the no beacon dot, not even the astronomicn dot, not dimmed, absent. She tried again and again, until blood ran from her eyes in steady lines, soaking the parchment-thin skin of her forearms. When pulled from trance, she whispered, "We were never drawn. We were imagined, and now we are no longer being remembered." The next morning, the Inquisition's own archive entries vanished, not redacted, not sealed, erased. The system designation for Ankros the Seventh once, listed with full planetary details. Demographic breakdowns, resource quotas now, returned a blank dot, no name, no location, no log of prior classification. The Inquisitor assigned to oversee the colony's stability, Intercessor Rave, attempted to access the sealed dossiers on threat vectors and emergent anomalies. His clearance failed. The system replied, "No such assignment." When he checked his own service record, it ended 3 years earlier. No mention of deployment to Ankh, no mention of his arrival. His transport ship, the Oculus Durant, was listed as lost in the warp. Crew, presumed dead. He looked at his own hands. They were stained with ash from the reactor silos. He'd inspected just days before. He turned to his acolyte and asked, not quietly, "Am I a rumor?" No answer, because her file was gone too. Soon it spread. Mechanicus cogitator links failed to verify their own network IDs. Citizen ID tags pinged non-recognition on doors they'd used for years. Maintenance servitors paused mid-routine, muttering invalid loop origin, then simply stopped. HUSPEC systems began to glitch, not visually, conceptually. Geographic readings looped back into themselves. The surface area of the planet refused to resolve. Scanning across the northern ridge yielded numbers that conflicted with planetary mass. The colony was growing, not in size, in possibility. New corridors appeared in the mines. Streets reshaped. Maps updated themselves with districts no one remembered building, but everyone recognized. It was as if forgetting had become function, and it wasn't just records. It was remembrance itself. A man woke screaming that he couldn't remember how old his daughter was. He had no daughter until 2 hours later, when she walked into his HABE unit and called him father with the certainty of someone who had always existed. Her biometric data matched. She had his eyes. The administratum attempted to print a planetary map from old templates. The printer jammed. When opened, the inside of the unit was empty. No ink, no gears, only a single piece of paper, already printed, already folded. Inside, one phrase: the shape was never yours to draw. The Inquisition demanded emergency extraction. Astropathic beacon flares were launched. Vox bursts fired in every known Imperial dialect. No reply. The ships in orbit confirmed what had already become obvious. No signal passed beyond the exosphere, and yet, the stars still shone. The gravity remained. The colony existed, just no longer in context. The universe, it seemed, had deleted the footnote. The fear was not death. The fear was isolation from memory. That they were now a page torn from a book still being read. That they were left drifting between chapters. No longer plot, no longer setting, just echo. Some responded with faith. Preachers declared it a test, a sacred separation, a refining fire. Others turned to silence, choosing to record their own lives by hand, carving names into walls, dates into bones, voices into cassette reels. Anything to insist we were here. But even those tapes began to erase themselves, not instantly, gradually. First a word, then a pause, then whole phrases missing from playback. Then just breath, until the reel was blank, and the breath wasn't. There's the children forgot the sky had ever been blue. The elderly forgot what war meant. Some began speaking in tongues that did not exist. One man sat on the plaza steps for 3 days, muttering, "I am the last history of this place." He was not found again, but his shadow remained, stretched in the wrong direction, refusing sunrise. There are still records, scrawled by hand, etched in steel, written in blood, but none of them are received. No ship comes, no message leaves. Encrosed 7 still spins. The wind still moves across its towers. The people still breathe. But in the eyes of the Imperium, it is not lost, it is unmade. UNWITNESSED. And soon, perhaps, it will no longer need us to remember it. It will remember itself. They weren't looking for it. By then, the colony had stopped digging. What was left to find beneath a world that had already forgotten its name? The machines still operated reflexively, ritualistically, but the orders had stopped. The schedules collapsed. The maps rewrote themselves daily. And so the drills ran not for ore, not for quotas, but out of momentum. It was one of those forgotten drills, deep beneath extraction layer 19, that found the edge, not stone, not alloy. Boundary. The bit halted mid-spin. No resistance, no impact, just stillness, as if the machine had realized it was not permitted further. When the crew investigated, they found the shaft had ended, not broken or collapsed, but completed, as if the path had been drawn to its final point, and waiting for them there. Embedded in the untouched crust was the vault, no door, no seam. A smooth hemisphere of dull silver set into the bedrock like a buried thought. It didn't glow. It didn't hum. It simply was. Nothing could scratch it. Nothing could scan it. Auspex returned silence. The machine spirit refused to respond. Even the ground around it was wrong, too cold, too still. No tremors, no ambient noise. A silence that pressed, not passively, but expectantly. The Mechanicus declared it null. Not a threat, not a discovery. A pause. Something to be noted, filed, and left alone. But the miners kept returning, not with tools, just to look. Some knelt, some wept. A few tried to speak to it, their voices failing mid-sentence as if their own breath didn't want to disturb the waiting. Then, one day, a child touched it. She hadn't been brought there. She wasn't authorized. She had wandered down empty lift shafts, across abandoned catwalks. Through layers no longer mapped, they found her small hand pressed to the vault's surface, her face calm, her eyes steady, and the vault opened, not with sound, with acceptance. The surface parted, not like a door, but like an idea, changing its mind. Metal folded back into itself, revealing a downward slope of perfectly smooth steps, no markings, no dust, untouched by time. She stepped inside. No one stopped her, not out of paralysis, out of understanding. She was not chosen. She was unfiltered, unafraid, unwritten. She had never learned to fear silence, or closed spaces, or the weight of expectation. She had not yet been taught what not to touch, so she touched, and the vault, waiting longer than memory could measure, responded. The adults followed, not immediately. Some stood at the threshold for hours, others days, but eventually, they descended. Inside, there was no technology, no thrones, no glyphs, no control panels, just space, vast, circular, hollow, and along the walls, not lights but reflections, not mirrors, moments. Each panel displayed a version of the viewer, not as they were, but as they could have been. Paths taken, paths refused. One man saw himself laughing, surrounded by children he'd never fathered. A woman saw herself weeping in a cell, her crimes unnamed, but undeniable. One adept saw nothing, just darkness, and began to scream. The child sat at the center, on the floor, smiling. She wasn't looking at the walls. She was listening, and something was speaking, not in sound, not in language, but in invitation. The vault asked not what they were, but what they had hidden, and then what they would give to stop hiding. Some left, unable to face what waited in their own shape. Some remained, one by one. People began to enter the vault, willingly. Workers, enforcers, even tech priests, stripped of protocol, each emerging, altered, not visibly, but aligned, simpler, quieter, certain. The vault never closed. It didn't need to. Those not ready simply couldn't find it again. Not because it moved, because they forgot the path. It was not a place guarded by security. It was a threshold guarded by consent. And the child, she never left. They brought her food, water, blankets, but she never used them. She said softly, "It's warm in here. It remembers me." When asked what was inside, she tilted her head. "There's no inside. It's just the part where we stop pretending." The Inquisition dispatched a psyker. She lasted 6 steps before her mind snapped. Her last coherent thought, recorded before seizure, was this: "It's not revealing secrets. It's removing lies." No further attempts were made. The vault became sacred, not sanctified, not codified, simply respected. A thing older than terror, older than architecture, older than language. It had waited not for a key, but for someone who had never learned to withhold permission, Someone who stepped forward, not because they understood but because they had not been taught to refuse. Now the colony turns around, that place. Schedules adjust, paths realign, pilgrimages form, not enforced, not celebrated, just chosen. And in the stillness of the vault, the child still sits, listening, waiting, smiling, because somewhere inside its impossible shape, it speaks not of what comes next, but of what was always willing to begin. It began as a delay, a slight miscalculation in orbital rotation, said the first reports, a hiccup in the planetary schedule. The eastern sky held its midnight blue longer than it should have, and the horizon refused its gold. Auspex relays pinged blank, chronometers ticked on, but Idrin 7 remained in darkness. For the first 3 hours, emergency protocols engaged. Illumination grids lit up across the hive sectors. Hub lights surged. Reactor cores spun higher to compensate. But as the 6th hour passed, with no change, something shifted. Not in temperature, though the chill began to crawl, like a tide, but in perception. The colony began to feel unseeked. It wasn't just that the sun had failed to rise. It was that the planet had forgotten it was meant to. Astronomical calculations still showed the star, hanging where it always had. No nova, no eclipse, no damage. The sun was there. The planet simply no longer moved to greet it. Rotation ceased, not abruptly, not violently, just UNREMEMBERED. The magos of temporal mechanics declared it a memory shear, a theoretical condition where physical causality obeys consensus rather than force, a planetary scale act of forgetfulness. The sun still poured photons outward in every direction. Other systems still basked in its radiance. Orbiting satellites caught the light, reflected it, measured it, but the surface of IDRAN 7 remained cloaked, not by shadow, by absence. Plants withered, crops froze. Thermal regulators overcompensated until coolant ran dry, and then the statues began to speak. They had been left where they were, discovered in the crater fields, along collapsed tunnel mouths, embedded in mineral seams that should have crushed them to powder. Metal grown, not forged. Each face different. Each responsive to gaze. But now, they responded, without watchers. Whispers came, not audible at first, not through air or wave, but through thought. Miners began to report hearing sentences that they hadn't thought, spoken in voices they almost recognized. Turn slower, child. You've not yet earned morning. The light knows what you've hidden. The voices weren't accusatory. They were gentle, almost parental, as if the world itself had decided the colony wasn't ready to wake up. The statues moved imperceptibly. One day, a finger shifted. The next, a head turned. A week later, entire limbs realigned. Always, when you end up see it, always towards something unseen. A child was found curled beneath one such statue's feet, sleeping peacefully, her body warm despite the freezing air. When roused, she said only, "He told me not to be scared of the long night. He's still spinning, just not for us." The governor issued new protocols, schedule continuity, enforced rest cycles, simulated sunrise via artificial lighting, but the illusion fractured quickly. No amount of lumens could replicate what the soul expects from morning. Sleep grew erratic. Minds drifted. Some began dreaming while awake, and always the same whisper, "You have not yet turned enough to deserve dawn." One astropath attempted to reach Terra, his soul thread scattered, not snapped, not attacked, refused, as if the signal had been told to wait its turn. Gravity remained stable. The planet's orbit did not decay. Clocks ticked in defiance of the sky. But for 72 hours, no sun rose. Not because the sun failed, but because time forgot how to face it. In the manufactorum ruins, a servitor began scribbling equations on the walls and coolant. The sequence was irrational, recursive, but each loop ended with the same expression: await, observer alignment. The tech priests argued over its meaning. Some believed the planet awaited a particular gaze, someone who could reach its axis with presence alone. Others whispered of celestial disobedience, that the planets had grown tired of turning for others, and simply chose to stop. On the third day, the light returned, without fanfare, without warmth. The sun rose exactly where it always had. The statue ceased whispering. The voices ended, but a chill lingered deeper than temperature, the kind of cold that lives in the marrow, that remembers what it was like to be unspun. The vault's surface grew warm for the first time. The child inside smiled. They tried to stop him, she said, but he only stopped for us. No one asked who he was. They all understood. Not a god, not a machine, just something older than motion, something that knew not all darkness comes from absence. Some waits patiently for understanding, and once it has been heard, it turns again. It did not come with sound. It did not tear open the heavens or shake the ground. It came the way a thought comes without arrival, without warning, already present before one knows to resist. The name, not a word, not a designation, not a symbol scrawled in forgotten dialect, just itself. And it was known across IDRAN 7. Every remaining soul stopped, not froze, stopped, as if breath, thought, time itself had been waiting for this alignment, as if every second that passed in ignorance was a prologue, and now it spoke. Not aloud, not even in the mind, but beneath it, inside the self, a vibration too old for ears, too deep for vox, too personal for translation. Each person felt it differently, some as a lover's whisper, others as the last scream before death to the children. It was a lullaby they'd never learned, but always remembered. To the old, it was the sound of their own bones answering back. Every voice in the colony tried to repeat it, some involuntarily, some deliberately, some in hope, others in defiance. And that was the mistake. Language buckled, throats tore, eyes ruptured, Adeptus, Mechanicus, choked on sacred binary. Guardsmen clawed their own tongues free. Vox units shattered themselves from within. Because it wasn't a name, it was a mirror, a truth, so precise it allowed no distance. To say it was to become it, and not all were built for that. The surviving logs are broken, fragmented, corrupted at the moment of transmission. But one stream remained. A single servitor, once thought inert, began scratching at the interior of an abandoned bulkhead, not with tools, with bone, fingertip worn to pulp, knuckle to shard. Still, it carved slow, repeating 3 lines. The first, it did not enter. We did. The second, it did not awaken. We remembered. The third, this was not a tomb. This was a seed. Afterward, it stopped. No shutdown, no command, just stillness, as if the act of writing had completed its purpose, as if it had never been meant to survive the knowing. The vault remains open. The statues have all turned, not toward the colony, but downward, toward the crust, toward what waits beneath. Words. The black sun has risen, and the world is turning. Again, not to orbit a star, but to face the name that now lives inside it. And in the silence, after knowing, the planet EXHALES, not in relief, in welcome, because now it remembers what it was, for, and what comes next. You do not build tombs in secret. You do not plant them beneath workmen and silence. You hide seeds, and you wait for them to be seen, understood, spoken, given. Form now. Edron 7 is awake, not alive, not sovereign. Awake. It is not a place, it is a speaker, and its first word was its last listener. There was no invasion, no rebellion, no last stand ID ran-VI. I did not fall. It opened, and what lay beneath was not horror, not salvation, but something far older than both. A voice, buried in silence, waiting not to be heard, but to be understood. This was not the story of a cursed world. It was the story of a question, disguised as stone, waiting for someone to answer it with their mind, their breath, their name. They thought it was a tomb. It was never a tomb. It was a beginning, and we were the final ingredient. Now it speaks, and the galaxy listens, but no one knows what the next word will be, because this seed has taken root, and we are what it grows.